forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger 10. Here's Steve Dace.
Indeed, and I even wore my name tag today just in case you forgot. Say it, don't spray it. I am Steve Dace alongside my co-host, but important to remember, never partner, the one and only Nosferatu himself, Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you again, my undead friend. How you be?
Doing okay, doing okay. It's 40, 45 degrees out. Why do we always talk about the weather?
Because we live in the Midwest, and that's what everybody in the Midwest
Well,
does.
40 degrees, 45 degrees.
In the Midwest, the weather is a pickup line at a singles bar.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I think I might get a tinge more sun than I have for the last, few months this week. So, there's always bright sides of life. Keep on the sunny side. Always on the sunny side.
I noticed how you kept the camera mostly on me while you were talking about that. And that's good that you're looking out for people's screens. You don't want them to have that white glare, what it was like watching Todd Licklider's Iowa-era basketball program.
Mm-hmm.
The red spots would just kind of burn right into your plasma screen there. All right, so
it's like when you come in here, whenever it is in April or May, for the first time without long pants on. You want ivory. That's it for you right there.
Indeed. Blinded by the white, we like to say every spring here on the show. All right, well, let's get to it. Let's start with our big 5 topics on Bigger 10. And this week, we have a thematic show. It's to division or not to division, Aaron, because the Big 10 is reportedly considering scrapping divisions, which, in my opinion, is absolutely the right move. It would give us a more balanced schedule. Teams would play each other on a more often frequent basis. And in the end, it would just be the 2 best teams would make it to the championship game every single season. I think it's an absolute no-brainer. I cannot think of a reason to actually keep with the divisions. It's not like this is some long-standing tradition in this league. In fact, we're on our second set of divisions in only a decade. But what say you? Would it be the right move for the Big Ten to go ahead and scrap the divisions?
I think so. And this is coming from, so it's easy. A lot of people would say, well, it's easy for Steve Dace or Mark Rogers to say, yeah, we should scrap the divisions because you're the 2 big dogs in the league. And that is true. It's going to be more beneficial for both of those teams for sure if there are no divisions. But the key part of this is the scheduling balance, if they actually do this correctly. And that's why I'm in favor of getting rid of divisions, is because, for one, I think it strengthens the conference overall. You're not going to get Ohio State Northwestern. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's something wrong with that. You're not going to get Ohio State Northwestern 2 times in 3 years or something like that, whatever it was, or Wisconsin, Ohio State, every other year. I think there's going to be an opportunity for a little bit more variety in terms of who the best teams actually are in your league playing at the end of the season, probably for a berth in the college football playoff. That's the way it should be. Now, for teams like Iowa and Wisconsin, but especially teams like Iowa who are really, really, really middle of the pack most years or above average, solidly above average, but not great most years. If they do the scheduling correctly, you basically know you got to be better than your rivals. And if we cut down to 8 games, if they do this, and I don't know if they can do this, Steve, if they actually had dynamic scheduling, kind of like the NFL, where they just schedule out, the teams that you're going to play at the end of the year next year, you're not scheduling out 6, 7, 8 years in advance of conference play.
There's nothing stopping them from doing that.
There's nothing stopping them. No. So if Iowa, let's keep divisions as a shell, just as a shell, but not as a binding, whoever finishes atop. You split the teams up into East and West, and you basically play, the team that finished in your spot over on the other side, this team that finished above you, and the team that finished below you. Kind of gets complicated when you're talking about the top and bottom of the standings. Something like that. You get my gist, though. Something like that to increase the parity, though, when you talk about playing or fleshing out that Big Ten schedule. That allows people some upward mobility. So if you're a team like Indiana, Like last year, you had a murderer's row. Well, you probably deserve that because you finished near the top of the standings, but it just allows you to have a little bit more upward mobility in terms of momentum and going from year to year and just earning your way into the games that you play.
So you were born in 93, right? So you probably have like almost no recollection of the Tavian Banks, Jared DeVries era of the last truly good era of Iowa football under Hayden Fry. You probably don't even remember that. I would guess that 2002 team when you were, 9 or 10 years old is probably like your benchmark memory. For me as a Michigan fan, we moved to Michigan when I was 10 years old in 1983. So about the same age, just a different decade. That's kind of where my Michigan fandom kicked in. Well, that 2002 team, you'll recall, we had two teams go 8-0. Ohio State and Iowa both went 8-0 in the Big Ten. And because Iowa lost a non-conference game to Iowa State, they lost out on representing the Big Ten in the old BCS, and Ohio State went on and won the national championship. Without divisions, those two teams would have settled it on the field. And the amount of pros on those two teams, you might have seen more pro football players in one Big Ten game than in the entire history of this conference. I'm serious. I mean, the amount of pros that were on that 0-2 Iowa team and that 0-2 Ohio State team, well, they never got to settle it on the field. And with divisions, without divisions, they would. All right, under this format. But let's go back and see how would things have been different in the history of divisional formats in the Big Ten. So we're going back, I think, to 2011. So without looking at tiebreakers as best we can, you can't do it perfectly, okay? But as best as we can, here's what you would have had year by year without divisions since the Big Ten launched the Leaders and Legends in 2011. All right, in 2011, the very first year, Michigan State against Wisconsin, Kirk Cousins and Russell Wilson, we would have the same exact title game. Without divisions. 2012, we had Wisconsin against Nebraska. Now, this was a crazy year. We had both Ohio State coming off the Jim Tressel silliness and then Penn State with the real scandal under Jerry Sandusky. Both were banned from championship play that year. And so Nebraska got in instead. Without divisions, though, or Wisconsin got in instead, I should say. Without divisions that year, we would have had Michigan versus Nebraska instead. In 2013, both Ohio State and Michigan State, 8-0 in the Big Ten, so the very scenario with Iowa and Ohio State, played itself out, and those two teams would have faced each other without divisions for the championship too. In 2014, we had Ohio State versus Wisconsin. Without divisions, we would have had Ohio State versus Michigan State again. In 2015, we had Michigan State versus Iowa. That's the same matchup we would have had without divisions. In 2016, we had Penn State versus Wisconsin. Without divisions, we would have had a rematch of one of that season's best games. Remember that night game in Happy Valley and Penn State blocked that field goal to upset Ohio State, right? We would have had a rematch of that game. You would have had Penn State versus Ohio State. In 2017, we had Ohio State versus Wisconsin, same game we would have had without divisions. In 2018, we had Ohio State versus Northwestern. Minus divisions, we would have had an Ohio State-Michigan rematch. Michigan and Northwestern both 8-1, but Michigan won the head-to-head. 2019, we had Ohio State versus Wisconsin. Without divisions, and I kind of had to project here if the same tiebreakers within division that we have now, if we did this for the league without divisions, all right, the way that tiebreaker would have worked with the three-way tie for second place behind Ohio State is Minnesota, actually. That was their 11-win team, that great team that P.J. Fleck had that went down and won, I think it was the Outback Bowl over Auburn. Minnesota would have played Ohio State for the Big Ten title that year instead. 2020, you mentioned Indiana. Well, instead of Ohio State versus Northwestern, we would have gotten a rematch between Ohio State and Indiana instead without divisions. And then last year we got Michigan and Iowa. Without divisions, we would have had a Michigan and Ohio State rematch. So if you look at winners and losers here, as we continue through this thread, and the third aspect of this, who would have been the winners and losers if we didn't have divisions? So without divisions, here were the winners and losers. In total, the matchup in the Big Ten championship game would have been different 7 of its 11-year history. Teams like Indiana and Minnesota would have actually made it too. They've yet to make it. Northwestern would not, despite the fact they've made it twice. Michigan would have been a big winner. Michigan, remember, didn't make it to Indianapolis until last season. So if Northwestern would have been hurt the most, Michigan would have benefited the most. It would have actually made it 2 other times prior to its actual debut in 2021. So your thoughts, and this is going to sound snobbish, okay, and it probably is. But if I am commissioner of a league, okay, and that league is called the Big Ten, I want a system that it gives the benefit of the doubt to Michigan and punishes Northwestern the most. That's just the bottom line. I mean, particularly in a TV rating, TV revenue.
It's literally the bottom line.
Yeah, it's literally the bottom line. In a playoff era, is I want to give a team with Michigan's branding more opportunities than a team like Northwestern. And I think that's one of the reasons they're going to do this. And I think that has played itself out as we go through this exercise, Aaron.
Yeah, and just from a fan perspective and from a national and TV perspective as well, 2016, a rematch between Penn State and Ohio State. Can you imagine the hype going into that one? This year, even though it would have hurt my Hawkeyes, if I'm being objective, though, imagine turning around after beating
having to run it right back?
After beating Ohio State for the first time.
And now we go from the snow and you get Ohio State in a dome. You got to do it again.
Imagine that game.
Yeah.
So just from an enjoyment perspective, there's not, the plucky Wildcats of Northwestern, that's a cool storyline. Nobody in, Peoria is a bad example because that's in Illinois, but nobody in Pawnee, Indiana is going to tune in to watch Northwestern take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. So I just think that getting rid of divisions again, increases the likelihood that you're going to have compelling matchups in that championship game. And it's less of a concern now if the college football playoff is going to be expanded to. But until that actually happens, it increases the likelihood that your champion is going to go to the college football playoff.
Boy, could you imagine if Jim Harbaugh and Michigan finally get off the schneid? Then the next they beat Ohio State. Now the idea that the weather beat Ohio State, do C.J. Stroud threw for 700 yards, okay? Yeah. But the very next week you go indoors on a fast track and lose to them again, but this time it's for the Big Ten championship. Oh my gosh. I cannot even begin to imagine what the Michigan message boards and sports talk shows would have been. Okay. But here's where the teams like Northwestern, though, because we can't make them cannon fodder, right? We can't turn this into Major League Baseball, where the entire sport for basically the decade of the aughts existed to subsidize the New York Yankees and the Red Sox, right? Okay, before Major League Baseball finally got smart and let teams negotiate their own TV deals and put in the luxury tax. We are a league here. Right? We're not a Shark Tank, okay? So, yes, you want to incentivize your biggest brands, but you don't want to also make it so that it's a balance. You want to incentivize your Michigans, but as a league, you can't afford to have Big 2, Little 8 from the 70s either, because all those games are on TV now. In the 70s, they weren't. But now every game's on TV, and you don't want 3 or 4 or 5 teams drawing flies on a Saturday either, because that hurts your brand too, right? So here's what I think is a brilliant give and take, which is the next issue. To reduce the conference schedule to 8. Because now what it does is you now tell Northwestern, brother, you can go 8-4 every year if you want, okay? Go out there and schedule 4 W's in the non-conference, and then go 4-4 in the Big Ten. You're 8-4. That's a hell of a season. That's a hell of a season most years at Minnesota. Okay, that's an acceptable season most years at Iowa. That's a hell of a season at Illinois. You see what I'm saying? This is now how you provide. You have majority rule without putting tyranny on the minority. This is the good give back, and I totally agree with this as well. That the Big Ten is also discussing, just like the SEC does, cutting from 9 to 8 conference games as a way of balancing that out for the teams in the conference that traditionally don't have the resources with some of the teams at the top. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, why the heck are you beating yourself up every single year if the SEC gets to play, McNeese State, on November 2nd before rivalry, or November 13th before rivalry week? Why are you beating yourself up by playing that extra conference game? Like you said, it gives your entire league, if they want it, an opportunity to schedule a compelling matchup, another compelling matchup going across the country or something like that, or another tune-up, which I'm sure I would honestly love to see from an Iowa perspective as well. Just get one more opportunity to get some good snaps in there before going on to the onslaught of the Big Ten season. And then the other part of this as well, I'm fine with scrapping divisions in general. I am I'm really in favor of it if and when they make the schedules each year dynamic and formulaic, so that you have a better chance. It not only behooves the programs, it's a good deal for them, so that they're probably playing somebody with an equal record as they had last year, maybe equal footing. It also makes for better TV as well if you at least attempt some sort of scheduling for parity's sake.
Now, Scott Dockerman over at The Athletic says that as part of this 8-game schedule paradigm, the Big Ten is thinking of going with 3 permanent rivals for every program, and then your schedule, the other 5 games, would rotate with the rest of the teams in the Big Ten, and you'd actually play them more often than you play them right now. And so here would be the permanent rivals, according to Scott Dockerman at The Athletic, for every team in the Big Ten. For Illinois, they would play Northwestern, Purdue, and Indiana every year. Indiana, Purdue, Maryland, and Illinois. Iowa would play Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. Maryland gets Rutgers, Ohio State, and Indiana. Michigan State gets Michigan, Penn State, and Northwestern. Michigan gets Ohio State, Michigan State, and Rutgers. Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska. Nebraska would play Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin every year. Northwestern, Illinois, Purdue, Michigan State. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Maryland. Penn State would get Ohio State, Michigan State, and Rutgers. Purdue, Indiana, Illinois, Northwestern. Rutgers would get Maryland, Penn State, and Wisconsin. And Wisconsin would play Minnesota, Iowa, and Nebraska. I like this overall.
Yep.
And you can see some yin and yang. You can see Michigan in exchange for having to play Ohio State and Michigan State balances that out with Rutgers, right? And Penn State similarly. Okay. The one thing that I kind of wonder about, though, don't you want Maryland and Penn State playing every year, right? Don't you want Penn State to establish some kind of, Eastern rivalry from its old days as an Eastern independent? So wouldn't you want them playing every year? But if you know the history of Maryland versus Penn State, I mean, it's extremely one-sided, so maybe that's not that big of a deal. But your thoughts on this layout? You can see Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Iowa, to me, are the 3 teams that get the toughest trio. I mean, Ohio State's is not easy, getting Michigan and Penn State every year, but they're Ohio State, man. I mean, they're the talent they recruit every year. So to me, Wisconsin, and if there are, I don't know that there's any losers here, all right? But if I were to say the 3 teams that I think get the toughest draws, I would say it's Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Iowa. But what do you think?
I think Rutgers also has a tough draw given who they are and who they have to play, and Penn State and Michigan as well.
Yeah.
But I actually like the like from an Iowa fan perspective, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska. Yeah, those are kind of your 3 main border rivals that you want to beat every single year. Illinois isn't really the rivalry that once was. I do like having, though, locked in. You're going to play these 3 teams. That's kind of the main takeaway from this as well, because I think this lends to a broader point. Making sure you have locked in rivals that meet some sort of regional expectation or some sort of historical standard there. It's kind of the zig to the SEC's zag. Right now, they're trying to become a cross-national sports league, not just a conference. They're trying to become their own sports football league right now, and trying to make it kind of a national league at a lower level. Yeah, there are still the rivalries, there's still the pageantry, there's still the tradition, but they're going much bigger in terms of their footprint. You have these locked-in rivalries every single year with the Big Ten. You're kind of zigging to that zag and going hyper regional, which is kind of the roots of college football in the first place. So I kind of like that on that level.
Like, can you think of the last time Texas A&M played Georgia?
No.
I don't know. I mean, I think I read the other day they played like once since A&M's joined the entire SEC, or twice at the most. I mean, that's kind of that goes right to the heart of what you're talking about there, is that you got to make sure you don't lose your identity. And so what I love about this plan is it incentivizes your biggest brands, because keep in mind, if you're a Northwestern fan and you're kind of alienated at that, well, hey, man, incentivizing your biggest brands and letting them cash in, you get the same share of the money that Michigan does, all right? We do share everything here in this league, right? So I love the fact that it incentivizes your biggest brands with a meritocracy of no divisions. 2, though, I like the idea that it's just roll over everybody at the same time by giving people an 8-game schedule. 3, I love the plan of permanent rivals, and the vast majority of these harken back to the most traditional rivalries in the Big Ten. So we're modernizing while maintaining our identity, right? We're not modernizing at the expense of it. And overall, I love it, man. Yep. I was not a Kevin Warren fan with the way things were handled in 2020. I love the fact that he's held up the playoffs in order to try to destabilize SEC, ESPN hegemony over the sport. I love that idea, and I love this, and I love this plan. I love if they follow through with it. I don't really have a single substantive criticism of it, Aaron.
No, neither do I. I think there always needs to be wrinkles that are ironed out, but at the end of the day, even if there's not some sort of formulaic scheduling from year to year, the extra non-conference game that at least schools will be able to sell tickets to a home. That's an extra game that you could potentially sell out to your stadium, or at least sell some tickets. That's going to be a major selling point, I think. So overall, I think this plan is A-okay.
Folks, the moment we've been waiting for since September is finally here in honor of the big game. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 56, is giving new customers 56-1 odds on either team. Bet just $5 or more and you get $280 in free bets if your team wins. Now, if you're not a new customer, though, you can still bet on Super Bowl 56 props instead. DraftKings Sportsbook offers a wide range of betting props throughout the big game. So take your shot at winning cash by predicting props like if a non-quarterback will throw a touchdown pass, like the Philly special a few years ago, fourth down conversions, total yardage, so much more. So don't forget, though, you've got to download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use promo code BIGGER10. All one word, promo code BIGGER10, and get 56-1 odds on either team. Bet just $5 or more and get $280 in free bets if your team wins with the promo code BIGGER10 at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 56. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Gambling Disorder Helpline at 800-270-7117. 21 and older, Michigan only. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full terms and conditions. And it, of course, now is time for our weekly game of Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. And Aaron, we begin with one for you. Would you rather have the Big Ten demand each team plays at least one non-conference football game each year against a Power 5 opponent with that extra date now with going down to 8 conference games, or continue to let schools make whatever decision they wish for themselves?
I'm just going to let every school make whatever decision they want for themselves. So, if you're letting the SEC, play for the most part patsies and cupcakes as much as they seemingly want to do, why are you gonna make your teams do that themselves? So I think I would still let each team do what they want to. Play the FCS teams of the world. I don't really care at this point anymore. Most of these teams are probably not going to be making the college football playoff anyway. And if you win your conference championship, what difference does it make if you played McNeese State or Alabama in the first game of the year?
Yeah.
When in the future you're probably going to be going to the college football playoff automatically anymore. So don't unnecessarily beat yourself up anymore. Next one is for you. Would you rather have robot referees for basketball or robot umpires in baseball?
Definitely robot referees in basketball. Basketball is absolutely the worst officiated sport of them all. I think it's also the hardest sport to officiate because I just think the athletes are the game is so fast. Yep. And the athletes are so much better than the officials. To me, I think what we really need to do in basketball is come up with, and the amount of revenue we're generating here, they have to be able to do this. Come up with something that like former players, and they're like guys that retire in their 30s and 40s or are still in good shape, maybe into their 50s, that they are willing to do it. Okay, because I watched a game I think it was Purdue, Illinois last night. And Kofi Coburn got his second foul, like the 6-minute mark, of the first. Now, Illinois actually, I think, led the game at the half, and then Purdue, boy, that performance they had in the second half was as good as I've seen any team play this year. But Kofi Cockburn, fairly important player in the game, right? In this league, right? Okay. 6 minutes into the game, gets called for a foul, and he's for a second foul, so it's an auto bench. And in the first half, he's just literally standing there and doesn't make a move, and the Purdue guy goes up for a rebound, and because Cockburn is so big,
that's happened so many times.
He kind of just kind of bounces off of him. With Cockburn didn't have his arm in there, wasn't
number of times
over his back, nothing.
To Cockburn and some of the big guys like Zach Edey at Purdue.
Yeah.
The number of times I've seen that happen this year, they get called for a foul because they're bigger. I mean, it's benefited me a couple of times. Not that Iowa's beat both those teams, but it's ridiculous.
And I just think former players and stuff that know the culture of the game just know how certain physics of the game work, that there's no way to go up for a rebound, even if Cockburn is not attempting to go over your back and you have position. There's no way to go up for a rebound against a man that big and not have to contort your body to some extent. It's simple physics. You guys can't occupy the same space. So Cockburn gets called for a foul by standing there. He was literally doing nothing, right? And I mean, to me, I just think the opportunity, if you could incentivize this financially so that former players who still are in good shape and understand the speed of the game and the culture of the game and make them referees, I think it'd make a huge difference. All right, for you, would you rather have a college football commissioner that unifies how each conference does its scheduling, or keep the conference by conference distinctiveness in college football?
Well, I'm not really sure that there is much distinctiveness right now in terms of scheduling, honestly. I mean, it's the same basic plan in each conference, at least in the Power Five. You
have some that play 9, some that play 8, some that have divisions, some that don't. That's what I mean.
Okay, that's what you mean. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think so. I would rather have kind of some uniformity so that we don't have to have these conversations anymore. Well, that team played this and that, because at the end of the day as well, I'll just reiterate this. It should be probably as even as possible, 9 or 8 conference games. I would go for 8 conference games. I think that's better for the entire sport. That's better for the lower levels as well, because then the big boys have to pay them a little bit, you know. I think that's good for the entire sport. And when you have the opportunity dangling out there, as I said before, of an automatic qualification to the college football playoff as well, I think that makes the sell a little bit easier of having unification. This last one is for you. Would you rather referees let everything go or call literally every borderline foul?
I'm, kind of old school, no blood, no foul. So unless I am purposefully impeding the progress of a player, then I would not call a foul. I think.
So you'd let stuff go?
Yeah, I would let it. I think way too many, and this is now me being selfish, but I see Hunter Dickinson get called for way too many moving screens simply because the whoever's got the ball for Michigan on the ball screen goes cuts in the opposite direction than Hunter's screen. And so it just looks like a moving screen. And I would imagine this happens to, big men on every team with a ball screen offense that every program runs nowadays. I just think a lot of that crap is cheesy and tacky. To me, unless it's specifically, it's clear that your actions were intended to impede another player, then, hey, man, no blood, no foul. You got to remember, you're talking to a guy that grew up rooting for the bad boys. All right? Now, I'm not saying let's go there, okay? I still like basketball. I like to see the ball get up and down the court, okay? But I'm not big on calling a bunch of ticky-tack fouls whatsoever, or as Bill Raftery likes to call them, nickel and dimers. Not at all. That'll do it for this week's edition of Would You Rather. We'll come back with our Twitter poll results and feedback of the week next. This week's Twitter poll, we asked you, do you approve of the Big Ten getting rid of divisions in football and returning to 8 conference games? 57% of you said yes. 27% said no. 16% said scrap divisions but keep the 9-game schedule. Those results surprise you at all?
Not really. So if we're adding up the no and scrap division but keep 9, that's 37, 43%. So it's a clear, plurality or majority? I can't remember which
It's a clear majority.
It's a clear majority want to scrap divisions and go back to the 8 conference games. Yeah, I don't think that really surprises me too much. I mean, that's nearly 2/3 of our audience. So I think it's a fairly popular thing. I don't know if it's because of the scrapping divisions part or the 8 conference games part. That's the part that I'm not quite sure about, because the more I talk about this, and even today, going to 8 conference games is actually sounding better and better to me all the time, just because of the possibilities that you can have with that extra non-conference game. So for me, I think now I'm more sold on getting rid of divisions for the 8 conference games than anything.
Well, I mean, you create a scenario where, again, you're incentivizing your prestigious programs, but you're also creating a scenario where you got to have 11 or 12 bowl eligible teams every year. So those teams that are not as prestigious can still absolutely be relevant and generate revenue for your conference as well. I mean, I think it's a perfect blend of both worlds, so I'm all for it. Let's get to the feedback of the week from Marcus J, who writes, was Harbaugh's dalliance with the NFL all an orchestrated yet ill-advised attempt to make a splash on signing day, like some 4D chess move that made sense when he had been in the sauna for too long? Now, you and I worked together on another show, but the official policy there still stands on all the shows we're on.
Never.
4D chess is never the answer. It's just random acts of the person you like that you cannot explain. It's never 4D chess. Never is a hard word. It never is. There is no 4D chess. This was literally just random acts of Harbaugh that, and to some degree, ended up turning out in his favor, because even though Michigan's entire recruiting class was already done in December, what was the number one school everybody talked about on signing day? Michigan, because of Harbaugh. We thought he was leaving, and then he announced, "I'm back, bitches." So, I mean, no, I don't think it was a plan. If he was that sinister, dude would not have been 0-6 against Ohio State and 0-2 against Mil Tucker. Okay, so no, I don't give him that much credit.
There are, in contracts, there are clauses called force majeure.
Yeah.
Is there one in his new contract that's called like force de harbs or something like that?
So for those that don't know, force majeure is like of an act of God, something that neither party could have possibly quantified when they negotiated this contract, comes into play, and therefore may render the whole thing or parts of it to be moot in light of that, right? And is that what it's like negotiating a deal with Jim Harbaugh, where the whole deal is, what's funny is everybody gave Ward Manuel credit for giving him that haircut and cutting his salary in half, but since he hit all those damn incentives, he ended up making, I think, more money last year than he ever made at the school before.
Really?
Okay, so I mean, it's just it's just weird, man. The dude abides, man. The dude is just weird. Okay? He's just weird. That'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Bigger 10. You can keep up to date on what we think about all things Big 10 between episodes if you do that. You can also like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, follow, however applies on however platform you watch, like YouTube, or listen like iTunes. Please keep doing that so we find more Big 10 fans just like you. Until the next time, for Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Dace. We'll see you then.